All right, well, now the fun part.
I know. This is the
You know, it's like we've got
all.
money. You know, I've really seen in the last few years a lot of people getting enthused about seed, and there's a lot of new seed growers that are actually getting their chops down, and it's really exciting and, you know, good to see that. But now I start to worry about where are we going to take all this seed. I mean, eventually I know that we're going to have an outlet for all this seed, but in the meantime, you know, we're kind of on our own a little bit, and we have to really create some of these markets. And so I'm going to just run through a little bit of the introductory considerations about the economics of seed and marketing, and then Andrew and Rowen are going to talk more specifically about some of the entry points into that and how you can actually make some money on this. So we're going to start. You've seen this slide here, but again, I just want to emphasize, just really know where you're going to begin with, or at least have a pretty good idea. And I recommend all of you to just start growing small lots of seed for yourself to save for your own place, because that in itself has intrinsic value. And don't underestimate that. We're going to spend most of the time here on the second thing, the production seed for multiplying for commercial use. I'm not going to say too much about the last two. That's been covered a little bit earlier, and Frank's going to talk a lot more about that. First about the stock seed being an elite seed. That this is the cherry that everyone wants. This contract here is that small quantities of high-value seed, and it's great, but it also requires a lot of careful observation and attention to detail. But I'm going to just pass through this for now. And plant breeding, again, Frank's going to cover this part, but I think we really at OSA trying to emphasize the importance of participatory plant breeding, and it's really something that right now is it's underfunded, and I think this is a real challenge for all of us. And here's the big question right here. Just actually, these two guys love each other. It's just, but this is an issue of when you're putting all this energy into building something up, and then it's just out there in the public domain. I mean, we're talking about a different kind of a paradigm from the one that exists today. So again, some of these are just we've been covered before, but I can't emphasize enough is starting with the right crop. And certainly the best, if you can choose a crop that does really well for you, just climatically and soil-wise, you are going to be so far ahead with that. And do you have any experience with it in the past? And also, usually people that are successful when they have a certain passion for that crop. It's something that they really love to eat, or just love to see grow. And then there's the question of how does the whole seed portion integrate into the rest of your farm. And I'm a big proponent of trying to encourage produce farmers, as many as I can, to take up the seed cause, even if it's only ends up being 5% of their total income. Because I think that if 50% of all the produce farmers had a seed project, think of how much additional biodiversity we would have out there. I mean, it would just jump us to the next level. And then, of course, is there a market? That's the... And study trial results. Dress warmly when you're studying trial results. And, you get to know what's out there, and really, trials are a little tricky. It's not, they're not easy to interpret, and we all love to jump to conclusions. We have one trial and we go, oh, I know how this variety works now, but I've seen the same crop in slightly different soils do much differently. Two completely different ways of performing, and So, but you need to know what the baseline is out there. So you need to put like the leading hybrids or the leading commercial varieties kind of as a benchmark to see where you're at with the varieties you want to grow and how much selection or continual work you need to do, or are you ready to multiply it right away? And then, you know, going through the cost-benefit analysis and Jared, could you tell me again the name of the fellow who's got an excellent book, Daniel Bresbaugh?
It's Daniel Bresbaugh, who's from EcoSign from Canada, and he has a wonderful resource called Crop Planning for Organic Agriculture, which you can get through if you look up Tourne de Sol Farm in Montreal. They have that available on their website, and they have it as a downloadable PDF and also as a hard copy. But it goes through crop enterprise budgeting for seeds. And he also has a bunch of resources on his blog, which is called goingtoseed.wordpress.com. And so you can find some of his blog articles that talk specifically about crop enterprise budgeting.
Great, thanks. So this is just kind of a list here of a lot of the things that may be unique to seed versus growing produce. And so you need to keep all of these things in mind as you go forward. Actually, this picture happens to be of a homemade sluice, and you know, that was another picture we were hoping to get into Beth's slide, but it's one of those things that uses little check dams coming down a sluice. It's sort of like gold technology, you know, of like separate, you know, all the heavy seed drops behind the check dams. Anyway, that's what, you know, look the cleanliness of that seed coming out of there. So, and then, you know, you kind of do the math here. You go through all the fun stuff, and I'm sure everybody does this, right, Beth? Right, Frank? Okay, good. And you know, and try. I mean, it can be a little painful, but you really need to go through these steps to see. I mean, and do as thorough of a job as you can, figuring out all the steps, what it's really costing you. And, you know, you may see that at the end of it that it's like you're way out of line on it and it's just not going to work for you. But so I definitely recommend this. You know, make a budget. And so you need to have kind of a timeline, what Rowen was explaining earlier, going through the whole season. What are the pinch points? You know, where are the labor needs? And I think that's usually a crunch time, is that labor, and that's one of the issues with produce growers trying to put a seed crop in there, because usually they're hustling produce to the market, and then seed really needs to be dealt with now a lot. I mean, it really needs, when it's ready to go, you've got to go in there and do it. You can't just hang around and just, unless, the one exception I would say to that is squash. You know, some of the fruiting crops you can let hang out for a couple of months. But a lot of the crops, like lettuce, it's dropping seed, or a lot of the brassicas, you got to get in there and get on it. And so there could be a conflict if you've got this produce operation. Jared.
Yeah, just, I mean, to that, I mean, as much as I mean, sort of the specific challenge there is that in some ways it's that, you know, unlike maybe a CSA or something like that, where, you know, throughout the growing season you've got kind of this continuous, okay, Tuesday, Friday is harvest day, you know, Wednesday is project day, you know, you can sort of plan it out like that. For seed crops, oftentimes there's planting and there's initial cultivation, and then there's sort of, you know, kind of a lull, and there's this big spike in your labor requirement during harvest that you have to somehow plan for. It's hard to come up with a way to create, you know, steady, a steady kind of labor demand so that you can keep, you know, enough people employed, or come up with a way to outsource a bunch of people or insource them, get enough people rounded up for harvest.
But it actually is amazing what you can do by hand and do a lot very quickly. You know, that's what I'm impressed with in terms of, I mean, people, you may get intimidated when you say, oh my God, I can't do seed. And like this farm I've been working on in California, they didn't have their beet variety it was no longer available, Ferono beet, this cylindrical canning beet, and I said, well, grow your own seed. And they said, really, we can do that? So they put the roots, they saved their best roots, put them in storage for a couple months, put them out, lost 25% to rot, but they still had 75 roots, grew them up, got these gigantic plants, and I borrowed their crew for 3 hours, and we stripped 75 plants by hand through like 3-foot by 3-foot screens, just 1/4-inch mesh hardware cloth, 2 times through that, 2 fannings, and I got it 90% done in a day. And and then it's probably another day to really clean it up fully, and that was 75+ pounds of seed. So you can do it at a certain scale, and I'm going to mention here scale in a second, but I think there's a lot you can do, if you just plan it a little bit. So you can maybe take 1 day a week or 1 afternoon a week to get some of these critical jobs done.
Steve, do you mind if I make a point?
Yeah.
So for those of you who are entertaining the idea of growing for contract for a small regional seed company, me being the director and one who sort of who sets up those contracts, I find it really helpful and really advantageous for my growers to keep track of information like this, of how much labor hours and how much time they're actually putting into their seed crops, as a reflection for me, and making sure that we're paying an adequate price for the seed that they're offering. And it helps us, I know, Steve, you're about to talk about scale, but it helps us as part of this sort of burgeoning new organic seed, sort of bioregional organic seed movement, to help balance the economies of scale. So it gives me a benchmark to understand how much that seed is really worth coming from my growers and how much time and energy they're putting in, labor hours, so that I can make sure that they're getting the price that seems fair for the amount of work that they're putting into it. Because a lot of the larger scale seed companies are paying prices that don't necessarily work for smaller scale seed producers, that are based on an economy of scale that might not necessarily work for your situation. And so it just helps initiate a really practical conversation between you and the regional seed company that you're growing for. And so keeping these records is really important.
Good. And you have to ask the question, are you paying yourself at least minimum wage? And that's, probably a lot of us don't want to go there, but it is something that I think if we're going to sustain ourselves in this, I think that's even the rock bottom right now. So, and then opportunity costs is there's something else that you should be doing, instead. And I say no, there's nothing. And then, okay, who's your customer? And I kind of break it down into 2. There's your wholesale customers, and that would be, and these guys are going to go into this more, but there's seed companies, food cooperatives and grocery stores, and garden centers. And then there's direct retail, and that's like direct to growers or gardeners. So that's sort of the whole slice of the market. And then I put this slide up here as kind of a exercise in a potential market. And what I've got here, this is California statistics from 2 years ago. It's the top 10 produce crops in California, carrot being the top, down to sweet pepper. This is fresh market. This is not processing. And what I've got is in the second column, I've got 5% of the total acres. So like 3,100 acres of carrots, so there's 60,000 acres in carrots in California right now. And I said, let's just say that we as the alternative community with our small-scale operations, if we could supply 5% of the needs of those produce growers, what would that represent in terms of the size of that market? So in terms of the number of acres, like carrots, 3,150 acres. To serve that 3,150 acres, you need 13 acres of seed. And that's a 5% of the, those are all 5% numbers, so they all relate to one another. So the $1.3 million is sort of a wholesale gross revenue that I based on sort of an average wholesale price. And that's the gross revenue in a dollars per acre. So, you know, it can be big, you know, up to, you know, maybe as much as $100,000 an acre. So there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, snap beans, you know, but, you know, I mean, the point is here, and that's just California. I mean, I didn't say anything of the Northwest or the Midwest or the East. I mean, there's so it's, you know, there is a market out there. There's a big need for a lot of seed, you know, so just to remember that. And then on the scaling appropriately, I think mainly the small scales, what I call, you know, besides doing like stock seed, which I think you can do in a small scale, is it's growing all those diverse lots, and I think you can stay pretty cheap in terms of your investments, you know, hand equipment and everything like that. Once you go into once you go into large scale, you've got some definite, you know, another set of issues, and this is really. The large scale really represents a very small fraction of all the varieties that are grown. You know, they're like basically almost commodity varieties. And so when you're scaling up, there's an implication that there's definitely issues here that you have to look at. First of all, of course, is there a market for this? You know, because you don't want to end up, you know, sitting on 1,000 pounds of seed and watching it compost. And then you have to have some kind of a gauge of what your buyers are going to want next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you know, as we plan ahead and move into the future. And right now, a few varieties dominate, but we're actually talking about a paradigm that's changing, that's you know, instead of growing 100 acres of one thing, we're looking at growing 1 acre of 100 things. You know, I think that's sort of the emerging paradigm here. And do you have the resources, and not just equipment, but labor and, you know, everything? I mean, it really, when you get into this large scale, you're really, I mean, you're taking on another whole set of tasks here. And of course, and I don't mean to pick on Nash, but this is a really important, yeah, at work. This is a seed farmer at work. So it's really important that you manage your reputation, and Nash is doing a heck of a job here, you know, and because everyone wants to know, hey, this guy's got a good life, you know. But no, he's a hardworking guy. But you really want to, you know, as Beth said, you know, it's like you got to be, you know, as clean as possible and the highest quality as possible, because, you know, your buyers aren't going to forget. And everything is based on your reputation, and a lot of people don't know who you are. They've never seen your seed grown, but somebody else has told them about you, and that's how you make your business. And it's, you know, this is so critical, and so you really, you know, this is the real incentive to do as good of a job as you can possibly do, and then, you know, how dependable are you, and are you just kind of a commodity seed grower, or are you in fact a world-class seed steward? You know, and so this is, you know, these are the questions you need to, you know, reach down deep inside and ask yourself. So I think I'm going to turn this over to Andrew.
So Rowen, you interrupt me whenever you feel like. I like being interrupted and I interrupt people. So. These are the basic ways that you can get into seed production as far as what we've been able to dig up. Thank you. There is more ways, I'm sure. You can get creative, but the basic way to get started that a lot of people get started with is farm-saved seed. Farm-saved seed is a great way to build your experience and your reputation. I think Nash started growing his own seed for his own use, and now everyone wants his seed. So it's like that's a good way to get into it. The great thing about Farm Save Seed is it's really the opportunity for true stewardship, where you are like, it's your seed, you're selecting it for your needs, and you're planting it, and you really want to do it. You have that connection with it. You don't have to worry as much about the, like, I just need to get it out the door and sell it to the seed company. You can actually spend that little bit of extra time working with it. But also at the same time, efficiency is also something to be really clear about, because like we were saying, there's other things that you could be doing too with your time. So always keep that in mind to be really efficient with your Farm Save Seed. And sometimes when you save seed, Farm Save Seed turns into Speck Seed. You end up with like an extra 10 pounds of lettuce seed sitting there, and you're like, wait, this looks great, and it germs at 90%. I'm going to find someone to buy it. And like we've actually bought a few lots of seed that really fit our situation when someone just sent out an email to us and said, here's the 10 things I have extra that I grew this year. Do you want any of it? And one example was we tried to grow a cosmos. I took a picture of it, wrote up a description. I had packets all ready to go. I had in the catalog. It was all perfect, but the germination was too low. So, and Sebastian Aguilar emailed us, and he had it. Same damn variety. So, of course, most of my work was done, so I was going to buy some from him. So yeah. So sometimes it works out, but the problem is it's risky, and you might not sell any of it, and just sitting there watching germination go on a tote full of seed is kind of heartbreaking sometimes. It's a really good way to get noticed and demonstrate your capabilities. That's like building your reputation, like showing what seed you have, shipping out samples of really good, clean seed that looks good. It can really boost your reputation. And it's also another excuse to get experience and then possibly get paid to experiment. Anyone else have experience with Speck Seed? Because I think most of what I do is all speculation seed, because we grow it and then we sell it in our catalog and hope people will buy it. But that's a different kind of speculation. But you're not sure exactly who's going to buy it when you put it up on the website or in the catalog. So contract seed is the other side of growing seed. And a lot of people won't grow anything unless they have a contract and they know what their price they're going to get for it, and they know they can grow it and do a really good job, because seed growing is a risky business. Sometimes you think you're doing great, and then out of nowhere you have failed germination. So I like to say that we can grow like hundreds of pounds of pea seed for anyone if they want it, but it's at 60% germination rate because of the weevils, which is not legal standards. But it's heartbreaking. But if you had a contract, you better know that you can get that germination rate, or at least you're pretty sure. We have been experimenting with contracts at our company, Adaptive Seeds, which is very small-scale contracts, and it's kind of funny, kind of comical, to contract like a pound of seed from someone, or 2 pounds or 10 pounds. Like most contracts tend to be pretty large. Growing a good like 20-pound sack or 50-pound sack is a really nice contract to go for. Anything else about contract seed?
Well,
I just want to say something. One of the really important things is the contingencies, like what happens if your crop has low germ. I mean, the germ is like subpar. And in many cases, like the buyer won't buy it. So you've spent the whole season growing this crop, and then you're stuck with it. And you might have a lot of money invested in this crop. So, and then, for example, like a biennial, like a carrot or an onion, you've grown the roots. With those crops, I always try to make it a two-part contract. So you get paid, the grower gets paid for the fresh product first, like the root or the bulb, and then some agreed upon minimum, and then the second year they get paid for the seed, if it passes germ. Now, if it doesn't pass germ, that's always a difficult thing. We used to subsidize the grower a little bit, and pay a minimum amount, just to cover some of their costs. But we basically both lost in that situation, unless you can go back and rework the seed and get it up to a certain standard, or maybe you can get it into a market that has lower standards. But it's the contingency issues is very difficult, and I don't know if any of you have had experience with that, but that's, you know, and get that really clear with the buyer up front, and get, you know, because the buyer will usually have what's known as an indemnification clause in there. You know, basically their ass is protected, you know. But you as the grower, you know, are taking a lot of risk. You're shouldering a lot of risk. So what's your indemnification? What protection do you have? And so Beth's smirking over there. She may say something about it. But anyway, anybody want to comment? Oh, yeah, that's right. If you produce, yeah. Yeah, I'll just speak to that quickly. Yeah, on if you have, we have these contracts where it's a gradation, like say 100 pounds, you get this price, which is the goal is to get that 100 pounds. If you get over it, if you get the next 50 pounds, say if you've got a double, you know, the yield is double what you expected, then maybe the next 50 pounds is some lower price, and then the next 50 pounds after that is some lower price yet per pound. But that's a good way to at least get something for your seed, even if maybe the last 50 pounds you're producing below cost. And you know that protects you. And usually companies will go for that because they don't want somebody else, you know, especially if they've supplied the stock seed. They don't want somebody else, you know, buying, you know, getting the seed from you too. So,
you know, and that also brings up an interesting point. If you are getting into doing contracts, now we're seeing a lot more collaborative contracting that's happening between, you know, smaller to mid-scale regional seed companies. So, what I do with my growers, because the amount of seed that we can pump through our small retail seed company is on the lower side. And so what I can do for my growers is help them broker a contract with another company of the same variety so that they can grow a bigger lot, and then we split the lots. And so I think that that's a really great approach for those of you who are thinking about getting into seed contracting, is talking about collaborative contracts. Because again, making your seed growing as efficient as you can and not signing up for a bunch of small, like 1 to 2 pound lots, I think will make the success of your seed production much greater.
It would be typically two seed companies going in together
yep.
to get a minimum maybe. So an example might be peas. There's a lot of really good pea seed out in Idaho that there's minimum orders. Like no one's going to grow anything for you unless you have like a certain amount of seed, which is way more than small regional seed companies can afford to buy. So going in together on a seed lot might be an option in that situation. Exactly. To meet the minimum.
Exactly. So for instance, I have a grower and we split contracts with Southern Exposure, or we split contracts with Fedco Seeds, and the grower will grow 15 or 20 pounds of seed for me and 15 or 20 pounds of seed for Fedco. And then it enables them to have, you know, a 50 or 60 pound lot of seed that they can then, you know, produce and have a place to sell it to, instead of only being able to grow 20 pounds for us and then sitting on that extra 30 pounds that they know they can produce. Does that make sense? Great.
And I wanted to clarify the whole thing about contracts are really important when you start getting into even small scale, but especially the medium to large scale contracts, because it really clarifies the relationship, because there's so many uncertainties, and every year people are surprised something goes wrong, and like there's that panicked phone call, like this seed just barely doesn't meet germination. Who has the incentive to clean it more? Like those kinds of things, because if we clean it more, we'll get a little bit more, we'll get the germination up. Like that kind of like deciding who's responsible for what protects both parties, and it also creates a platform where that conversation can happen, where we typically have conversations with new seed growers that are just growing a couple pounds of something, and we'll talk about how we're totally willing of paying twice the typical bulk wholesale price for this seed lot because it's a small lot and it's a special variety. But if you want to sell us 10 pounds of it, like we're then competing with other people that are also selling that kind of quality seed on that scale. So we would never be able to sell it out at a super high price in the catalog to meet our costs. So it's like having that conversation about each other's expenses and each other's overhead so you can work together to find a relationship that works really well is a really cool thing that contracts really enable, because like really it's hard on both sides. And and some seed companies just want to nickel and dime you and get the lowest price possible. Other seed companies will work with you. The more you build a relationship, the more stable that relationship can be in the future. So I see contracts as a really helpful thing that aren't particularly legal jargon or anything. They're just like this is what we both agree to do to help each other out and to make some money together.
I mean, this gets into the question about appropriate pricing. I was trying to figure out if that's where we're going. Do we want to go there right now? Or
yeah.
Okay, appropriate pricing. The best way to get the baseline and what the appropriate pricing is for a seed is to read all the seed catalogs. That's why I always put my catalog out last, so I can read everybody's seed catalog, see what's going on. Everybody laughs, but I'm not kidding. But no, I am too busy.
He sells seed to people and then undercuts them with his own catalog.
No, I don't do that. No, actually, I specifically don't do that, if I can help.
That was a joke.
So the question of pricing, it's unknown what a seed is worth. I'll guarantee you it is unknown. You can go into any catalog and you can find varieties of a red oak leaf that cost $25 a pound. And you can go into another catalog and look at a red oak leaf lettuce that costs $450 a pound. And you can go to another and it costs $1,500 a pound. What's making that difference? It's not anything except availability. How much of that lettuce is available? That's really what it is. And you can ruin that whole price structure by suddenly producing a lot of some kind of lettuce and undercutting some other person's lettuce price. And then suddenly, Oscard lettuce goes from being a $400 a pound lettuce to being a $40 a pound lettuce just because somebody overproduced it. So that will really make you mad if you're the guy who invented Oscard lettuce, and then somebody in this room comes along who doesn't know anything and says, Oscard lettuce, I think I'll grow that. And then you sell it to some other seed company for 1/10 of the price. You have just made somebody really mad at you. So there's this, it's got nothing to do in most cases with how much seed a variety produces. It has to do with how well that variety is being controlled by whoever is producing it. And that's where PVPs come in. It's to keep other people from producing, the seed that you bred at a big volume after you've done all the breeding work, and they come in and they sell it for 1/10 of what you want to sell it for because you're trying to recover your breeding costs, right? So this is a very sensitive issue, and if you want to have good relations with seed companies and get contracts with them, you won't be doing things like taking varieties out of their catalog, producing them, and selling them to their competitors for cheap. That's a way to make enemies, not to make friends. Overall, the seed pricing thing, it's really, it's the same old thing. It's what the market will bear. And I do look at the prices of rutabaga and pepper and everything when I'm setting my prices, and I'm not trying to undercut those people. I'm not trying to, grab the market by having the cheapest seed out there, because that's not what you want to do. You want to, if I cut the price of a seed in half, I'd have to sell twice as much of it to make as much money. I can't sell twice as much of it because there's not that kind of market. So it's like you need a Ouija board almost to do this. And really, the best way that I know to do it is look at the price of that kale variety on the market. Can you produce it at that price? If you can produce it at that price, then okay, you're in. But you wouldn't want to come in and just grow a whole lot of it, hoping to undercut everyone and grab the market. That won't happen, actually.
Especially if the kale is $15 a pound. Like, you're not going to, it's like, it's already too low.
Yeah, which is why it's really important to do the math in the beginning to know what you can accept as a price, because so many seed growers accept like a ridiculously low price because they're desperate for a market. But at some point you just got to say, no, I can't do this. And then the other reason for like this extreme price difference, a lot of it, some of it's availability, but some of it is because maybe similar varieties. One is a proprietary variety which has certain genetics, like downy mildew resistance, or in the case of winter boar kale, it's the only one that like really is big and produces amazing amounts of kale. So you say, well, why is winter boar costing $4,000 a pound when heirloom Vates kale is $40 a pound? You scratch your head, and the main reason is that growers aren't that price sensitive about a crop like kale, because one plant produces a lot. It's not like growing, lettuce, salad greens. So it's very crop dependent. And growers, the first thing that they want is reliability, or something that they can rely on year in and year out. Not only the supply coming in, but performance in the field. And and they're happy with winter boar. If we can come up with, and we're coming up with other versions now that are close to it, then we can actually get into that market. But until then, it's the only game in town. So you have to pay for that. You have to pay that high price. So, and I just want to say something about the seed company support. I think if you're doing a contract with a seed company, find out how they're going to help you. I mean, yeah. So,
well, I think being on both sides of things, being a seed producer and also somebody who buys in seed on contract, I oftentimes am probably more giving to the growers than I probably should be, and maybe I'd actually make a more decent living if I, sort of, what did you say, nickeled and dimed them. But ethically, I'm not. I don't want to do that, right? And so I think that the more we go down this road in the organic seed industry and create more transparency and create more relationships between seed growers and seed companies, I think we're going to be better off, because we're going to help create a better structure that really revalues seed for what it's really worth, instead of these economies of scale that dictate what happens from way at the top of this large-scale seed production all the way down to the little guys, because many of us who produce seed on a small to mid-scale can't compete with the large economies of scale. And so as a seed buyer, as somebody who buys seed, I do a myriad of things. I do what Frank does. I read the seed catalogs, as sometimes we work our way backwards from what retail is and then what can we reasonably pay wholesale. I try and meet my growers where they're at in terms of making sure that it's somewhat profitable for them to grow seed for us. But sometimes there's always what the market can bear and how much I can actually pay for that seed and what customers are willing to buy. And in this instance, when we talk about retail seed companies, we primarily market to gardeners, so the markup from our wholesale seed to packet is relatively high. But if we're selling more bulk amounts, then it changes the economic sort of considerations that we have to take in terms of how much we can charge for seed. Because the idea is that many of us who grow seed would very much like to get paid more for the seed that we grow. But we also see the implications of when we charge more for our seed, then who's paying more for the seed? And oftentimes that's farmers, who oftentimes have a really slim profit margin as well, right? And so it really, when we start to go down this rabbit hole of economics, we really see that we need widespread systematic change in terms of how much we pay for food in general. So I think, as we move forward with this organic seed movement, I think we're going to see large restructuring in terms of how much our organic seed is valued at. And I think it's going to take multiple generations to get it rebalanced again. So.
And a really important thing to consider when trying to manipulate what the market can bear is to work on your reputation. Or have varieties that no one else has. Or just try to get into a point where you can charge more and be transparent in a way where most of your customers, you'll never get all of them to be this understanding, but get most of your customers acknowledging the fact that they value your work as a seed steward and pay you a little bit extra for it. It's not that much to ask for $70 a pound kale instead of $50 a pound kale, but that could make a world of difference for a grower. So just consider those dynamics and what we're asking for, and try to work through that transparently, which I think is a really cool thing to see more and more of, is people being more sharing and transparent with to build relationships. Okay.
Yeah, keep moving.
This is, I don't even know what this is, some kind of purple flower and stuff by Silver Falls. I think it's Silver Falls Seed Company. They grow a lot of large-scale flowers. So there's a difference between growing a 50-pound sack of something for high mowing and growing 20,000 pounds of something for a big dealer. It's almost like it's double wholesale. You're wholesaling to a wholesaler. So so the economics of that get really, are very different. They can have really big returns if you know what you're doing and have a really good equipment structure and you really know how to harvest it and clean it. But the price is typically really low per pound, and it's also a big risk. So a lot of growers that grow on the scale have lots of different fields that they hope that most of them will turn out good because they know some of them aren't gonna be good. And so by the end of the year, they hopefully have a really good harvest by kind of hedging their bets and not putting all their eggs in one basket. But the other risk here is sometimes it's really hard to get high quality seed when you're working on this scale, because sometimes you can get someone to go out there and rogue that field, but sometimes it just doesn't happen because that's a big field. And it costs a lot to hire someone out there to go hoe out the off types. So you and sometimes it's just not worth it. So, but know that this scale is out there and possible. The organic seed world hasn't really gone there that much, but it could. And there's a lot of demand for seed by organic farmers on a huge scale, and most of those big farmers are not planting organic seed yet. So we're not necessarily competing with ourselves if we consider this big system of seed that there's so many different areas of getting into. I guess one last thing is that there was a funny example of there was a need for 800 pounds of catnip seed, and someone called us and asked us to grow 800 pounds of organic certified catnip seed. And it was just really, and it was really low price, but understandably, the prices are low when you're doing that scale. And the first thing I thought of as a small scale grower was, if I invest 3 years of my life getting a big catnip field established and ending up with 800, it's a perennial, buying a couple extra machines, getting all this stuff together, finally learning how to grow catnip seed, and then someone else can grow it cheaper and they switch to someone else. That kind of stuff happens a lot, so you got to really be careful. And so $200,000 later, you can't sell your catnip seed for 2 years in a row, just that 1 year.
90% of all hybrid tomatoes and peppers are grown in China and India, which just shows you that the companies are looking to produce stuff cheaper all the time. Mm-hmm. So you're not guaranteed.
This we could talk about this for hours, and we have 5 minutes. But some of you might want to be starting your own seed company. I actually don't want to talk about it. I don't want to give away any secrets because I'm not transparent.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, right. I don't know. There's a lot going on with seed companies. It's a whole different crazy, tangled, crazy mess. But it can be really fun and really rewarding if you're kind of that entrepreneurial spirit type, or you really can't stand working for other people, or you're just you're tired of selling wholesale. You just want to do it all on your own and market all on your own and spend all your time trying to sell stuff instead of trying to pick stuff. But overhead is a really big deal with seed companies. There's a lot of sunk costs when you start to get a seed company going. Catalogs, like we printed a lot of catalogs this year, and that's catalogs are not, they're really cheap per catalog, but imagine printing like hundreds of thousands of catalogs. That's what a lot of companies do. It's a huge cost. And let alone like developing your own online store. Some online stores are really cheap and really easy, but they're not very good. They don't do everything you need them to do. If you decide to develop it on your own, like I did, you become a web developer half-time. And do you want to do that? Or do you want to pay $20,000 to have someone else do it for you? So there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to starting your own seed company. But I do highly recommend it, and we do need some more. I don't know if we need thousands more, but we could probably use more. Especially if we start selling seed back and forth between each other, we can all ride that snowball downhill. As the metaphor was the organic seed world getting bigger and bigger as it like continues on its path like a snowball downhill. Sorry if that wasn't clear. The really great thing that I love about starting our own seed company is it gave us a really great chance to work with other regional seed companies. It's one of my favorite things to do is meet with other seed company people, share techniques, share skills, knowing that like 80% of our customers are our customers because we kind of developed that customer base, not because we stole them from someone else. Maybe if we were a huge giant seed company, we'd worry more about like market forces. But I feel like because we're small and regional, we can share really a lot with each other. And it's a really giving community. And also, like we said earlier about growing contracts, like sharing contracts and all of that, I'm really excited for the future because of that kind of opportunity. And if you guys start seed companies, love to chat about it and maybe work together someday.
Well, I also think, there's a lot of opportunity for shared growth for seed producers, and I think it's a great way to leverage greater profitability amongst a group of seed producers in one region. Sierra Seed Cooperative operates as an LLC in which the growers actually buy into the cooperative, and so we're sharing any of the profit that we're selling from the seed packets with all of our growers. So not only are they getting a check at the end of the season for the seeds that they're growing, but as much energy or investment money that they put into the company, they will be seeing rewards from that as we grow. And I think, I'm hoping that we can have more of that, have more of the seed farmers be participating in these seed companies so that that profit goes back directly to the farmers and less into the hands of sort of the middlemen, so to speak. And I think that that's how we're going to sort of rebalance things. And I can see, just from working with Andrew and with Frank and with various people, there's ways that we can leverage connections between regions so that we can all help each other in cooperation instead of competition. So, and so that's the way that we create an economy that's based more in abundance and less on scarcity, is how we sort of build these relationships with these seed companies. I definitely got into this because I love growing seed and not because I love sitting behind a computer. But it does, I will say that running a small seed company has, I've logged many more hours behind mashing buttons behind a computer than I would necessarily want. But what we see is that we're sowing sort of our hopes for the future in having a seed industry that's more transparent and more reflective of what we want for the future, which is farmers being able to sell and grow seed and profit from it, and having more seeds in the hands of farmers, diversified farmers. And so if you are at all interested in starting a seed cooperative, please do email me. I can't say that I have all the answers, but I've had 7 years of experience in doing this, and I think that we could use more of these sort of farm-based seed cooperatives and seed companies all over the country. And I very much get my inspiration from all these guys on the panel. So yeah, I'd love to hear, Frank, what you have, if you have something to say about seed companies, because I know.
Our seed company started just because I had too much seed of my own that I'd been keeping, right? So, and my wife said, if you're gonna keep saving seed, you're just gonna have to figure out how to sell some. So that's what stimulated our seed company to begin. And we were not at all dependent on that seed company to make our living for, well, it wasn't making our living for 10 years. It was making a percentage of our living. But we were selling fresh produce, or basically salad greens, to restaurants when we started our seed company. And we kept doing that. We kept doing that for 7 years before we stopped selling produce to underwrite the seed company. And after about 7 years, because of things that, well, basically because of the events of 9/11, that's what shut down my salad green business, and that's what put me into a trajectory for doing all seeds. But that was a really tough transition because the seed work is very demanding and very time-consuming. So being a part-time seed company, we were really just dinking around in some ways. But what was happening during that period is what Steve was talking about. We were building a reputation. Even though our seed sales were only accounting maybe for 10% of our income, we were pulling them off. And every contract that we got, we pulled it off. And we also started we had our own seed catalog. And I was only printing about 500 catalogs a year, which is nothing. But I was making sure that every seed company in North America got one of those catalogs. And eventually, one of those seed companies called me up. And it was Renee Shepard's first company, Shepherd Seeds. And this is what happens. Once a national seed company buys your seed, the other companies notice that, and they don't want to be late to an opportunity. So pretty soon, other seed companies will start calling you up too. And then they start to come and visit you, and they look at what you're doing. They walk around your seed garden with you. They see things they don't even say anything about that they want. And that's what happened to me. And so first one seed company visited me, and then Rob Johnston came and visited me. He saw one thing in my garden that he liked. And then I was suddenly selling seed to Johnny's. I wasn't making my living from the seed company yet, but when that happened, I was on the way. Nobody in the seed business wants to miss out on the opportunity to get involved with a good seed grower. And so the building of the reputation through doing some contracts, even if it's not your whole living, that's just an essential part of getting started, I think. And this is all slow work. There's nothing fast about seeds. So you may as well just take your time, I suggest. And then one day you realize that you're actually making a living growing seeds. And it does snowball if you're doing it right. And so I just don't think it's something you can just jump into with a combine and 50 acres and, a few random contracts. I agree with Andrew. You'll probably lose all your money doing that. So that's only my opinion, and that's my experience. But my experience was that I had to have a reputation before I had a lot of buyers. So just expect that.
So we're actually out of time here, but I'll just... Okay. Well, just a couple of things. I wanted to just talk briefly about an example that I've been involved in, a seed cooperative, which called Family Farmer Seed Cooperative. And it was a group of about 12 farmers located here and throughout the western U.S., and all very good, experienced growers. And as it's turned out, several of these people have their own seed companies. So it's because that's the way that one way they've been able to actually sustain themselves. But the idea for this group was to pool our resources together and operate as a cooperative of these hubs. Although it's been a struggle, and I mean these are all the reasons why we wanted to do it, and I think creating the community to me is almost like the most important of all, and I think that's what Rowen has spoken to a little bit about what she's trying to do in the foothills of the Sierras, is actually kind of infuse this idea of a seed culture. And so it goes kind of beyond an individual seed company, although when you're working with a lot of other people, it's fraught with a lot of challenges. And I'm just going to quickly go to that. I'm not going to go through some of the democratic principles, and I'm not going to really go through all this. We managed to get some grants and get some equipment and some marketing going. And in fact, the family farmers have sort of been resuscitated a little bit. We're selling seed in seed packs in food co-ops throughout the West. So it's a nice little niche we've found. And I think maybe Andrew said it or something, but find your niche. Where's a little niche that you can actually get into that could be valuable? And in our case, it was like farmer favorite varieties, that are farmer direct and favorite varieties of these farmers. But the challenge is, and I think one of the challenges is that because we are so much apart geographically, it's very difficult for people to come together other than maybe in a phone meeting a couple of times a year. And so you lack that continuity. And so you have the energy level sort of wanes, ebbs and flows, and it ends up that probably the biggest weakness is lack of a strong leader. And I think that's why, like individual seed companies succeed usually with a strong leadership. And I think that's, when you're a cooperative, it's kind of like, well, he'll do it, she'll do it kind of thing. And I think that's something we're kind of trying to work through right now. But I think the success of any enterprise really does either create one leader or a group of leaders that are really going to kind of contain this thing.
Well, and I think you hit on a certain point, which is talking about the benefits of a co-op in relationship to, your geographic relativity. With Sierra Seed Cooperative, I think our biggest bonus has been the fact that we sit within a 50-mile radius of one another. And the biggest advantages of us is that we get to share equipment. And we have a trailer full of seed cleaning equipment that we share between our 12 farms. And it makes it really easily accessible to everyone. It makes them easy to deliver their seed. If they have questions or have concerns with certain seed crops, seed-borne diseases, I can go out and make a farm visit and kind of hold their hand through certain challenges if needed. And so I think, and also there's a certain aspect of, even though our marketing capacity might not extend that much outside of that 50 to 100 mile radius, that people know the farms whose seeds we're selling in the packet. So when we say grown by First Rain Farm of Nevada City, California, people know Tim, and they're like, wow, I want to buy Tim's seed, and they have a real connection and a real commitment to supporting Tim integrating seed stewardship into his farm. And so it becomes sort of this marketing point where we can begin to take the local food movement to the next level to create regionally grown seed. And even if, at this point we are outsourcing some seed outside of our region for crops that aren't necessarily that economically viable, but what we're very transparent about that. And what we do is we let folks know, we let our customer base know that their seed dollars are directly supporting seed security and seed sovereignty in our bioregion, which I think is important, and I think it's going to set a certain amount of ripples, as we move forward in in this.
Yeah, and so I see that the logical step, sort of the future step, is these hubs, which are happening already right now. I mean, they're already sort of organizing as in their own regions, but it's building that seed culture locally. So you have these vested interests among the growers, and with the frequent interaction and communication, and then you still got the central hub. And then I think ultimately, and then linking up with other hubs, so you can kind of trade varieties or strategically plan for future grow outs. But I think ultimately, I think what I would love to see us move toward more is a link between the consumer and the grower. So we're talking about community supported seed. So CSS is what. And in fact, Nathan Coram at Meadowlark Hearth Farm, he and his wife Beth Coram, who are co-founders of Turtle Tree Seed, Nathan's written an excellent piece about community-supported seed, which I'd be happy to share with you, and he's gotten into quite a bit of depth with it, and I think it's something to really look as a model for the future, but it means cooperation between the customer and the grower, and so it's this mutuality principle. Nathan Coram, Corymb. And so, and this is just sort of a little thing of California. These are just bioregions in this state which would naturally sort of fit, in these clusters. And this is sort of our little list of sort of guiding principles at the end. And it is a lifetime journey because, seed just keeps going and going. We're kind of mediums. We're just trading it off to the next generation. But being really flexible, don't get too hung up on a certain idea. And then, investing financially only as much as you can afford to lose, but invest personally as much as you can possibly give, because that's what it'll require. And then good seed, well-maintained seed always increases in value over time. The record keeping, of course. And finally, just embrace your work passionately, because that's really the only way to go. And so anyway, thanks for your attention.